We'll take one quick last question, if we could. Just here. Thanks, Paul.
Hi, I'm Antna Verghese. Not sure who to direct this to, but just an interested observer, not an economist or a student. One of the things as a layperson I'm struggling to get my head around is the role of credit. You know, we've been hearing that credit is going to freeze up. There's also rumors circulating that there's trillions of dollars waiting in the sidelines to be invested. Not sure where it's sitting, but it is, apparently. And in relation to that, you sort of hear about there's going to be inflation, there's going to be deflation, there's going to be stagflation, there's going to be hyperinflation. What do you all think is the most likely scenario, and in what time frame, and what's that going to do to asset prices, especially houses?
Whoa.
That's a good question.
Does that qualify as the quick last question?
Yeah.
So I was going to take the opportunity to assert that I'm a member of Generation Jones, which you can look up on Wikipedia, and we didn't get any of the things those boomers got. So, well, I mean, I don't think I'll offer a forecast, but what I will say is credit in the broad sense of the term is something that, yeah, credit in the sense of not merely of lending money between one person and another, but faith that investments will deliver the kinds of returns, if made skillfully, investments will deliver returns without being wiped out by unforeseen shocks to the global economy, that it makes sense to study for a job because the jobs will be there when you graduate. That kind of credit is crucial to the functioning of an economy, and the question of how we organise ourselves to maintain that confidence and credit is in some ways the big question. In the post-war period, we thought, all the answers in Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics seemed to provide a recipe to ensure that no matter what shocks hit the economy, we could keep it running at full employment. That meant that if you made an investment, of course, if it was a bad investment, you might lose your money, but if it was a good investment, it wasn't going to go wrong because the economy fell in a heap. If you're a worker, for example, or a union, that if you agreed with your employer to do something to increase productivity, there will be benefits shared all round rather than an opportunity to cut employment. All those kinds of things depend on one set of processes to maintain credit. That failed for reasons which I discuss a bit in my chapter, in my paper, and hope to discuss more in future. And we went to a system based on financial market credit, where the belief was the financial markets had the capacity to assess risks with incredibly fine precision so that we could again rely on the assets they generated. We had institutions like the ratings agencies
I'll wrap you up, John.
Say stuff, and that's failed too. Sorry.
Yep. I think it's a great question. If you ask a question like that, you should be doing economics, but only at UWS because we teach non-orthodox economics here. Credit, fundamentally we live in a credit-driven society, and we have a very, unfortunately, economic theory has built a world derived from the bizarre mind of Milton Friedman, in which credit drops from helicopters and is exogenous created by somebody like, guys actually at the controls throwing it out the window as the model of how money is created. That's utterly fallacious. In fact, the banks can create money out of thin air, which is not a bad thing. It's just a necessary part of a credit system. So we have a credit-driven economy, and we've let it go dysfunctional because that system will gladly provide as much debt as you're willing to take on because, frankly, they make money by extending debt. Because they do it so much at the stage we get money to finance speculative bubbles like we've been caught up in the last 20 years. When they burst, of course, they won't give money for people who want to go and make toothpaste. So suddenly the whole economy grinds to a halt, which is what we call a credit crunch. The money on the sidelines, that's turning up because the banks are no longer willing to lend, and at the other extreme, borrowers are no longer willing to borrow, particularly in America. And that's the money that's supposed to be on the sidelines. That's a natural result of a credit crunch because banks don't want to lend. They've lost too much by the previous ridiculous lending, and borrowers don't want to touch debt with a barge pole. So Ben Bernanke's racing in there by doing what he calls quantitative easing. He's thrown something like $1 trillion US into the banking sector and expects the banking sector to then go and lend that and revive economic activity by expanding credit. Instead, the credit's simply piling up unlent by the banks. There's a good reason for that.
You up to?
The good reason for that, Americans currently owe $45 trillion. If they're going to create credit the way Bernanke is trying to do it, they need to be willing to take on $55 trillion worth of debt. They're not going to do it. So that's leaning on the sidelines. That leads to your inflation-deflation story. Because I have a credit-based view of how the system operates, I believe we're in for deflation rather than inflation. and the central banks will need to throw, say, 25 times as much money as they've done so far at the system to have any chance of causing inflation. And I certainly can't see them building a big enough helicopter to do that.
Guy, do you want to...
I'm going to finish with 2 words.
Yep.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's 3.
So I'll forget the I'm.
Could you, I think we've been particularly privileged tonight with these 3 speakers. Could you thank them on our behalf? Finally, I would like to have a couple of thank yous. Primarily to, in the first instance, to Professor John Lodewicz, who's just over here, who's head of the School of Economics and Finance at UWS and has been our partner in this series, in fact made it possible, and been a terrific partner, and I think we've had a very successful series. So thank you to John and to all at the School of Economics and Finance. A great place, as we said before, for students to study, and you can, as long as you don't get too depressed, you can go and study with Steve. And there are others there, and we can go to Raja, who's going to read Steve's works eventually. Thank you to my own team at the Whitlam Institute. We're a small mob, but we like to be pretty active. Amy is ill this evening, which is a shame, but she's really put in an amazing effort for this series, as has Sandra Stevenson, who is here tonight. And thank you to our colleagues around UWS, including the media people, Paul and Amanda, who are here this evening. We've had terrific support in all of this from Riverside Theatres, again, who have been fantastic, and once again, our thanks to them. To Kim and Co from Starscribe, who have been doing the digital recording and making sure it's of a quality that can be rebroadcast, we're very grateful. To the ABC, who have shown a great interest, and to other media, including Fairfax community newspapers, our thanks. Don't lose track of the Whitlam Institute. This has been a learning time for us as well. We're not finished with our interest in the economy just yet. On the 30th of November, we're running a Governing the Economy symposium with Ken Henry confirmed and Gary Banks, Chair of the Productivity Commission. I'll warn you, it'll be a bit more than $10 to get into that one. So that'll be the 30th of November, but watch out for it because, as usual, we try to make sure everything gets into the public domain, if at all possible, that we produce. You can subscribe on our website if you want to know what's going on. We have a range of things happening, but for tonight, thank you and good luck.